Ministerial Commission hosted here in Uganda, where we have all the ministries, both of Uganda and Kenya, looking at the issues of trade and issues of commonalities amongst them. The levels are that you have technical officers looking at them at the lower level. What they're able to deal with, they deal without. What they are not able to deal with, they escalate it to the ministerial level. And what the ministers are not able to deal with now goes to the principal level. Now, this is basically to ensure that we have a balanced trade regime between the two countries and try to minimize any disadvantages to trade by any of the countries. So, and in the economic sphere, really Kenya and Uganda have made very many strides, a lot of strides in terms of trying to look at the opportunities on both sides. If you look, for example, in terms of tourism, a lot of people don't know that Uganda is a huge tourist market for Kenya. Last year, Uganda was number 2 in terms of the tourists who came from Uganda to Kenya, only second to the United States. And that is a huge thing. Uganda also, and I'll talk about it later on, is what I would call a food basket for Kenya. As you know, Uganda has a comparative advantage in terms of production of food compared to Kenya, and I'll want to deal with that separately later on and see how we want to move forward in terms of that. When you come to issues of movement of goods and services, that connectivity between two countries, for example, Uganda depends a lot on the port of Mombasa, and the port of Mombasa is a gateway both for Kenya and for Uganda. And for the region, because a lot of trade comes in from Mombasa into Uganda, to northern Uganda, to South Sudan, to DR Congo, to Rwanda and Burundi, and so on and so forth. So the Kenya Ports Authority is a strategic asset that I can say can be said is co-owned between Kenya and Uganda, basically, because Uganda has invested a lot in that infrastructure. And currently we have volumes of goods that come to Uganda through that port. Not forgetting that there's also the oil pipeline that brings in oil from the port of Mombasa to the port of Kisumu. And now there are mechanisms where we have oil also flowing through the Lake Victoria, transportation of oil through the Lake Victoria through barges. So you can see we consider Uganda, Kenya considers Uganda as also a transit country in terms of our trade with DRC, Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi. So the infrastructure in Uganda is of concern to Kenya, and because the infrastructure in Uganda assists Kenya to transport goods and services beyond Uganda alone. So coming to this, you find that Kenya, Uganda, and the East African region is expanding in terms of infrastructure. The SGR railway, for example. Kenya has a standard gauge railway running from Mombasa all the way to Naivasha so far, and is projected to come to Kisumu and to Malaba border. Uganda is also putting up the same infrastructure from Malaba to Kampala to the border downstairs with Rwanda. And Rwanda is also putting up the same to Kigali. Not forgetting that South Sudan will also have a line between Kampala and South Sudan. So you can see that kind of infrastructure and what it will be able to do to open up the region in terms of trade. So the focus on trade between the two countries and beyond is immense. When it comes to issues of tourism, for example now, Kenya boasts a number of tourists who come to the tourist attractions in Kenya. Uganda also have magnificent tourist attraction, particularly if you go to the western Uganda in the area of Murchison Falls. It's just a marvelous area to go to. So what we are saying is that if a tourist comes to Kenya, that tourist should not go back to Europe or to America without coming to Uganda. So the idea is to set up a one tourism circuit between Kenya and Uganda, which we're working on. Last year, all the tour actors in Kenya invited the tour actors in Uganda to come to Mombasa so that they can start to look at ways of merging this tourism circuit. And the tour actors in Mombasa offered the Ugandans 100 beds for 5 days to come, and then they merge up. We recently launched a platform where, again, this year in November, the tour actors in Uganda will come to Mombasa in November, so that to continue cementing and try to have a seamless circuit. That will call for quite a number of things: standardization, for example, of procedures, standardization of movements in terms of visas, standardization of really the hospitality industry, which is important, so that if a tourist comes to Mombasa, goes to a hotel, then comes to Kasese, goes to a hotel, they should be almost the same standard of treatment, which I think is something we need to work on, and we are working on. So I think that will be a very exciting area because the complementarity between the tourism in Kenya and Uganda, they're totally different. Kenya is basically a savanna, an open savanna. And you find that things like the wild beast migration, the lions and all that. Uganda is mountainous, and the Murchison Falls area and the way the Nile goes around the Murchison Falls area is totally different area. So I think tourists will be able to benefit, and our tour circuit, I think, will benefit so much from that. So that is one area we're working on, and quite a number of areas we're working on in terms of cooperation in trade and in the economic space. The other pillar, which is also a very important pillar, is the diaspora. We have a lot of Kenyans who live in Uganda, and of course we have a lot of Ugandans also who live in Kenya. Now, by and large, it has been discovered that this diaspora is a very strategic group of citizens, because wherever they are doing something, and whatever they are doing has a bearing, has a contribution in the country where they are. But at the same time, as they make a living or do business, they also send back money to their relatives and to their friends back home. And this money is huge. For example, if you take Kenya, last year, the total diaspora remittances back to Kenya surpassed the exports of tea, and tea is our number one export. So you can see that now the Kenyans in diaspora, whatever the $100, $200, $300 you send to your parents, cumulatively is a lot of money. And therefore, as a mission, one of the things we want to do is to ensure that these Kenyans in diaspora are facilitated. Life is made easier for them by helping them solve some of the problems, by ensuring that any difficulties they have, we talk to the government, we talk to their counterparts in Uganda to make life easy for them in terms of trade that they are doing, in terms of work they are doing, those who are in school, those who are in prisons, we visit them. So the diaspora is a key cog in any diplomatic relationship. Now for Kenya, and when I'll be talking about food security, I'll mention it, but one of the things we want to do is that for the diaspora here to engage themselves in agricultural production. Agricultural production, because Uganda is endowed with very fertile land, very good weather, and for them to work with the Ugandan farmers to be able to produce food, and some of this food goes to feed Kenya in terms of our food security.
The Journey program on UBC TV. Come and shine in Blascon Paint and win the Twake edition. Buy Blascon Paint worth 100,000 shillings. Get a scratch card and SMS the code to 7197. Not only will you win instant airtime, but you could take home 1 million shillings daily, a share of 4 million shillings each week, or a brand new motorbike with fuel worth 100,000 shillings. Terms and conditions apply. Blascon, color your world. The Journey program on UBC TV.
The other area that we are working on with the diaspora for their contribution in Uganda is the area of conservation. We realize that conservation is an important thing now because of climate change. And climate change affects everybody. So if you conserve the environment, it does not matter where you are conserving the whole world. Back home, His Excellency the President Ruto wants 1 billion trees planted in the next 10 years. So our contribution as Kenyans diaspora here is to plant trees here in Uganda. We have a program coming up. We have been allocated some slot of land in Mabira Forest. So we want to engage ourselves in restocking of Mabira Forest. We want to work with a school there, partner with the school there, so that the young people also grow knowing about conservation. Doing seed nurseries and then planting trees to restock the Mabira Forest. That has got a huge effect in the Mount Elgon region, which stresses into Kenya also, and also the Lake Victoria Basin. So we're working with an organization called Pamoja Trust, which is a conservation organization that we are partnering with, and we will be launching our tree planting day, or a conservation day, on the 8th of December. During what we call Kenya Week, and I'll talk about Kenya Week briefly. So that will form the launch of that. In fact, after this meeting, I'm having a group called 1 Million Trees. We are coming to discuss how we can also partner. Quite a number of institutions are ready to partner with us so that we conserve Mabira Forest, to try to bring it back to where it was in terms of conservation. And of course, that now are some of the activities that the Diaspora do here. We also engage the Diaspora here in national days. During the Kenya Week, they showcase what they do, small and medium enterprise businesses, and so on and so forth. Now, the other pillar is environmental diplomacy. I've touched a bit about how do you want to go about that. The environment is a key cog in diplomacy. The environment is important in terms of, particularly for us and Uganda, as we share the same ecosystem. We share Lake Victoria, we share Mount Elgon, which is a catchment area for Lake Victoria. We share the resources across the borders in those areas. So it is important for us. There is an organization called the Lake Victoria Basin Initiative, and from this week on Saturday, there's a big meeting in Munyonyo coming up on issues of Lake Victoria. So we as the Kenya Commission pride ourselves in the fact that we are involved in environmental diplomacy and working together with organizations in Uganda and working together with Uganda to see how, as bordering countries, we can conserve our environment in as much as we can. And finally is something that is normally at the heart of all Africans, and this is culture. We have one of the pillars as culture diplomacy. Now, people don't realize that culture plays a very important role in all those things I've talked about. Culture plays a big role in peace and security. Culture plays a big role in the economy. It plays a big role in conservation. And so cultural diplomacy is important. That what are the cultural positives that Ugandans have that Kenyans can borrow? What are the positives in cultures that Kenyans have that Ugandans can borrow? And I'll pick one, for example. There's something I call food culture. Now, Uganda is a dot with a lot of food and a variety of food. There is maize, what you call posho, there is cassava, there is potatoes, there is the famous matoke, and so on and so forth. So there's a diversification of food. Kenya, unfortunately, a mood where we are not diversified. When I was growing up, we were quite diversified. There was cassava in the homestead, there was millet and sorghum and so forth and so forth. But now we are so much on maize. So when we do not have maize, and we don't produce enough maize, so when we don't have maize, we have hunger. So one of the things you want to transport is food diversification. And there's a program that I'm working on, starting with schools, to translocate a certain species of banana. We have discussed with the research station in Namulonde to support us in identify the right banana that we can grow in some parts of Kenya, so that we start introducing it as food. There's a lot of banana, yes, not a lot, but there's some banana in some parts of Kenya, but it's not regarded as the way matoke is taken care of here. And not only that, because I've looked at what bananas does here, it's not just about food. There are many other products that come from banana. Alcohol is made from banana that ends up with manufacturing of sanitizers, of some of these things the ladies use on their hair, on dyes. So there are whole products that come from banana that people don't know about. So those are some of the things that you want to do. So culture is important. If we look at the border communities between Kenya and Uganda, they are very similar in language and in culture. That can be used positively to enhance relationship between the two countries. And what we want to do is to be having annual cultural activities on transborder communities, starting with Busia next year and going up towards Tororo and so on and so forth. So that way we are able to bring the citizens of the countries together. And don't forget that our main focus is the integration of East African community. Everything that we are doing is laying a foundation for the integration of the East African community. The issue of the East African community is an old story. We had the East African community between Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania that did not see the end of the light because of political reasons. But our leaders have realized that we have to integrate. And therefore, the current East African community with the 7 countries is not something that is an option. It's something that must happen. There's a lot of strides that have been made. Now, the East African region has an advantage in many ways. The population, if you take all the 7 countries, will be about over 300 million. The GDP is programmed to be growing about 6% in the year 2040. We have the east coast, the Indian Ocean, and you have the west coast in DRC Congo, which is the Atlantic Ocean. So we have in between the Asia, which is the factory of the world, and the Americas, which is the shop of the world. So we stand in a very strategic position as East Africans to deal with the trade that connects Asia and America. So we are in a very strategic position. Now, currently, there are quite a number of things that are happening. We know the headquarters in Arusha. We know the heads of state summit meet. We know there are quite a number of things are being done. The issue of movement of goods and services, free movement of goods and services, that's one of the protocols that is being worked on. The issue of visa-free movement by all the East African community countries. And ultimately, we are looking at a common currency, and we are looking at a common East African community as a federation. We are able now to deal with security issues, strategic security issues. For example, what is happening in DR Congo now, where we have an East African community force that is trying to deal with the issue of the insecurity in that part of the Eastern DRC. So I think it's an area that concerns all of us, and it's an area that if we look at it in the right way, is the future of our survival and for our generations to come. I want to say something about food security. As I mentioned before, Kenya is registered as one of the food deficient countries. Currently, our population is 55 million, and we are food deficient. Land is reducing because of the way we are now managing land affairs. So what does it tell us? If we are food deficient now, what happens in the next 20 years, where Kenya population will be maybe around about 100 million? So unless we strategically look at how we can produce food, not only for Kenya, but in the region. Now, Uganda is blessed with the comparative advantage of food production. So Uganda can serve as an anchor nation for food production, not only for Kenya's food security, strategic food security, but even for the region. So what we, as a Kenya mission, we have done, we have identified that Uganda, for example, if I take maize, Uganda gives Kenya about 40% of its maize production. Now, if 40% is, let's say, 1 million bags, I want this 40% to be 2 million bags for strategic food security. How are we going to do this? Now, I identified northern part of Uganda where most of these foods come from. And what I discovered is that we have the land here, yes. We have the farmers, which is labor. So that is the means of production. What is lacking is capital, organization, mechanization, insurance for the farmers, and the markets. So if you're able to put all this in one basket, then we are able to produce food. Production will increase, and therefore investment in agro-processing will also improve. So I toured 2 months ago the 5 districts of northern Uganda, just to talk to the farmers and to see what we are able to do. Now we are lucky now that we have been able to put together a team. We have a financial institution called Third Capital. Third Capital is able to give a financial capital to the farmers for food production. We have an insurance company that will insure the farmers in case something goes wrong. We have a company that's ready to provide mechanization so that we increase the output. We have an organization called Shamba Bora. Shamba means good farm, that is already working with farmers in Kiandodo area, that is able to give mechanization and scientific way of food production. So we're looking all this together. We are going to have Kenyans and Ugandans working together, produce food, both for Uganda market and for the Kenya market. So that is one project that is very dear to me, and is a project that I think is going to take traction very soon. The other issue, as I go towards my conclusion, is that there is a lot of potential in other areas of cooperation. In energy, for example, Uganda is now prospecting for oil. That is a plus for us in the region. We don't take it for granted. It's a plus for us in the region because we know we'll benefit from that. Lake Victoria is another area that is underutilized, and we can do so much in terms of Lake Victoria for our own economic development, both working between Kenya and Uganda, not only for fisheries, but for tourism and for transportation, because water transport is the cheapest transportation you can always have. So we have the population, we have the language, Kiswahili, the language that unites us. There's no other region in Africa that will have a population of over 300 million speaking one language. I know Kiswahili was popular in Uganda before, but it died out somewhere, but it's coming back. And we are ready to work together, because without language, a common language, it's very expensive to translate. So instead of us learning French in our schools, let us learn Kiswahili. As I conclude, first I want to thank UBC for giving me this opportunity to highlight what you are doing. The two countries, as we have said, are joined to the hip. And I want to thank our leadership of the two countries. I want to thank His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, a true Pan-Africanist, a leader who is so passionate about the East African community and East African integration. President Museveni has sacrificed and is always ready to sacrifice and to give up, to give in to anything, so long as it's towards the positive attainment of the East African community. And we want to thank him for that, showing that leadership. I also want to thank His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya, and for the very good relationship that he has with his counterpart here in Uganda, which is enabling us to get over some of the stumbling blocks in terms of cooperation. I remember just last month, His Excellency the President was in Mombasa at the port, and he gave orders about how the port should work faster so that we benefit, and how some of the barriers in terms of transportation is reduced so that the Uganda benefits. So we want to thank the two leaders for the continuous leadership, and I want to thank the citizens of Uganda. When I'm here, I'm not actually a Kenyan. Me, I feel I'm Ugandan. Ugandans are very warm people. Ugandans are genuinely warm, very generous people, very happy people, and that is one of the things we want to learn from Uganda. So I continuously thank the people of Uganda for making our work easier, for collaborating with us in every field that we want. I also want to thank the team at the Kenya High Commission for all the good work they are doing. They are made up of Kenyans and Ugandans who work for the mission, for the continuous focus that they have always given to whatever they are doing in this mission. So with all that, I want to say thank you very much. Asanteni sana na Mungu atubariki.
The Journey program on UBC TV was brought to you by Plascon, Color Your World.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
And shine in Plascon Paint and win the Twake edition. Buy Plascon Paint worth 100,000 shillings. Get a scratch card and SMS the code to 7197. Not only will you win instant airtime, but you could take home 1 million shillings daily, a share of 4 million shillings each week, or a brand new motorbike with fuel worth 100,000 shillings. Terms and conditions apply. Plascon, color your world.
It's true what people say, that when I wash and you wash your hands with soap, we'll have less infections as Ugandans. After all, it's hands that handle money. It's hands that feed us. Hands that prepare soil for farming. Hands that we use to learn. And hands that we use for fun.
When I wash and you wash, it means clean hands for all. So, wash your hands with soap and clean water regularly to keep away infections and disease-causing germs. This message is from the National Hand Washing Secretariat with